All right, wonderful. For those who are just joining us, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. Today we are presenting Accelerate Continuous Testing with TestComplete, presented by SmartBear. My name is Akshita Puram and I am a product marketing manager at SmartBear as well. Just a few things. Welcome to everyone who is on the line once again. And as you know, we were just talking about the weather and how everyone's experiencing some deep, very, very cold weather this season. So I hope many of you are staying warm. At SmartBear, for those of you who are new to SmartBear, SmartBear is a leading provider for software quality tools for teams over 22,000 organizations around the world. Those organizations include Raytheon, Google, Sonic, and Vineyard Vines, just to name a few. They all use our tools every day to deliver higher quality software. Today, we're going to be really focused on our test products, but SmartBear has a very, very broad product portfolio that covers and spans 6 different areas, covering the breadth and the depth across the software development lifecycle. As I mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on how you can leverage some of the test automation products that we have. It's a very, very exciting time at SmartBear because last week we announced TestComplete 14.0, a release that includes many features that we're going to talk about today on really how to accelerate and maximize your continuous testing efforts. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. We will make it available on demand at smartbear.com/resources/webinars. Actually, any webinar we are hosting, whether it's in the future or it's a past webinar, we make it all available on that site. If you have any questions, please leverage the Q&A box. I know there's a chat box, but there's also a Q&A box, so we prefer questions are entered in that panel. Please also continue to be involved, and we also have an exit poll at the end of the webinar, so please go ahead and feel free as a reminder to enter that too. I do have one question. Just about the weather, so just wanted to make sure I get everything, all those questions answered, but feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the webinar because we can definitely answer your inquiries during the time. So today, to kickstart our conversation, we want to lay out the foundation with understanding common terms that have really flooded the software testing space. We'll start with a better understanding of what CI, CD, and continuous testing is, and the nuances between each of one of them. Actually, just last week at Twitter, on Twitter for the SmartBear handle, we were asked, what is the difference between CI, continuous integration, and continuous testing? So we'll start off with really laying that foundation for those people who may be new to the topic. We'll better understand what BDD is and then switch gears and see how to employ some of the features that accelerate continuous testing and continuous integration with TestComplete. Today I have with us Param Chopra. Param, how are you today? Are you on the line?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. Wonderful. So fantastic. Later in this webinar, Param will be actually demoing 2 products that together provide a very much a continuous testing platform for, number 1, all members in your software development lifecycle, and 2, those practicing also who are interested in practicing BDD, behavior-driven development. But before we get started, we want to have a quick poll for you to learn more about the technologies you are using and testing. So go ahead and launch that poll. As you can see, we want to know what operating system do you run your tests on. If you have more than one, I'll show it on the screen, but feel free to select all that really apply. Looks like many of us are testing on Windows, so that's great. It's actually very much a lead at 98%. Not surprising because TestComplete, we have a lot of Windows users, as for those who are familiar with it, know already. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for kind of giving us an overview of all of the applications that you run tests on today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with what is CI/CD. As I mentioned earlier, terms such as continuous integration and continuous deployment has really flooded the software development and testing marketplace. So understanding kind of a definition of what it is kind of important so we can talk about the features that can really help promote it. Continuous test integration is really the breaking of your development into smaller pieces, allowing teams to receive faster feedback in effort to detect issues earlier and produce higher quality software. And essentially looking at this definition too, it tells development teams to commit small chunks of code more frequently so we can tackle issues faster. So if you were to summarize it in just a few words, I kind of label that in orange underneath, where it's development, you're moving towards smaller pieces so that you can have faster feedback. Continuous testing is often tied to continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. While the terms are used sometimes interchangeably, there are actually, very distinct, are actually slight yet key differences between all of them, and especially the last three. Continuous integration does not at all deal with delivering the application to production. It only deals with getting new code into the master branch of a repository more frequently. To have this occur more often, code needs to be built into smaller pieces. So that's what we were talking about earlier, development moving to smaller pieces, which allows teams to detect issues earlier. When those bite-sized pieces of code is pushed, the application or service is then packaged up, built, tested, and then deployed on a test server. When this is in place, your entire testing suite should run when code is integrated, from unit tests to API tests to UI tests. I did get a note in the chat from Sarah if there's any sound or if she's unable to hear. I just wanted to do a really quick sound check again. Could just someone let me know if I'm still clear, loud and clear? I'm all good, Sarah. It looks like we are all good here, so if you can double check your sound, that would be great. And if not, we can always make sure to reach out to you afterwards to kind of share the material. Going back to the differences, continuous delivery is the first level of actually getting the product onto the hands of the users. But the actual act of deploying the branch to production is still a manual exercise, as you can see from the second flowchart right here. So you can see that with the gray arrows we have here still being manual. Continuous deployment, the last chain you see at the bottom, is the combination of continuous integration and testing and deploying to production, all in an automated fashion, which you can see by all of the yellow arrows tying each of those steps together. So as soon as you write in your terminal a git commit and leave a nice detailed message, Jenkins starts the entire process. If all the tests pass, the new master branch replaces the current one in production. And with automation in place, there's no human interaction after the code itself is written. I hope that kind of lays out a foundation of what the differences are between each one of them. So everything we talked about, from moving one step to the next step, sounds really fast and continuous and great. But we didn't really talk about testing. And at the end of the day, testing is really, sometimes really still found in the middle of the storm because it's not considered in many organizations throughout the development lifecycle. And in those situations can really be a source and a time sunk for many teams. So we need to automate our tests as much as possible at multiple layers of our application to really maximize the speed for anything continuous to exist. So continuous testing ends up being the foundation of delivering continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment, and allows you to automate so you can start reaping many of those benefits. Now I want to take a step back and really understand what that actually looks like in practice, looking at a continuous integration framework and what tools would be used to actually accelerate that continuous integration pipeline. So SmartBear can help visualize, test, and monitor your application throughout this continuous integrated pipeline. So this is a view 5,000 feet above on what a CI pipeline looks like in general. At the start, you may be working on your API definitions and specifications with Swagger. Once saved, you might commit that change to GitHub, and from there, Jenkins will take over, as you see how it lives on top of the pipeline. So then Jenkins is listening to any changes coming from GitHub, given that they have a very, very tight integration. Once it sees a change, it is going to pull in that new source code. It's going to run some unit tests, maybe some static analysis against the actual code, and then it's going to start packaging up the application. And in this instance, we're going to deploy just the API layer in a microservice and run just your API test against that. Different organizations may do it differently, but this is just one example of a CI framework. Then if something fails, we can catch defects much quickly after that, just testing the API. And then it's also great to deploy in layers to be able to move more quickly, find defects faster, and work on updates based off of the feedback that we receive. Once it's all green, we can build the entire application, maybe in AWS or something like Azure or Roku, but that UI will be built out so we can then run the UI tests against it using TestComplete or any tool that you may be leveraging, such as Selenium. But that's when the end-to-end tests come into play. Once those tests pass, Jenkins will then throw that code into production for it to be monitored by Alert Site, which you can see at the end. And that is a full CI/CD platform and what's happening at each step. And as you can see, many players here are really working through leveraging automated testing. Automated testing, test automation becomes then a really critical part of continuous integration and especially testing. There are many benefits of employing test automation at the API and at the UI level. So I'm just checking the questions. Okay, I'm glad. Looks like everything is good. First and foremost, I want to talk through many of the benefits with test automation that many of our customers and even other people who are just leveraging test automation tools are experiencing. First and foremost, you have faster development cycles with automation. Test automation allows you to run hundreds of tests of UI at the UI and API level in just minutes, something not nearly as possible with manual testing. Because of the level of combinations that can be automated, the varying workflows that are tested allows you to ensure more of your application is functioning properly. The second is just faster feedback loops. The shorter time between dev and validation, the quicker and cheaper bugs can be fixed. And that allows for also, one of the things we also talked about is just being able to run hundreds of tests at the UI and API level in just minutes. That is something that may take, hours. We spend days kind of just even converting converting our test scenarios into test scripts or converting code into test scripts. But by allowing to scale that approach and scale that effort, we can also increase test coverage. And the last but not least is that test automation really allows you to be consistent every time with your tests. So when your regression suite passes, teams can have the complete confidence that changes made did not break critical functionality. Another key element in the earlier CI framework that I shared was Jenkins. We talked about how Jenkins is living on top of that CI pipeline. I use Jenkins specifically in my example because Jenkins is one of those most popular CI tools today. It's an open source CI platform that is entirely built on thousands of plugins. With TestComplete, we have a native integration with Jenkins and other CI tools as well, such as TeamCity and Azure DevOps. And because of our command line utility, you can really integrate with nearly any CI tool. But what I really like about Jenkins is Jenkins pipeline. For those of you who are new to Pipeline, I'll provide a little bit of an overview. But with the latest release of TestComplete, we actually expanded our native plugin for Jenkins to include support for Jenkins Pipeline. Similar to many other tools, we have supported Jenkins Freestyle, which is really one of the most common tools that are ways people are leveraging Jenkins today. But we are seeing more and more organization moving towards structuring their CI jobs with Jenkins Pipeline. Jenkins Pipeline, for those of you who are new to it, allows your CI/CD pipeline to be expressed in code, making it much easier to run your tests in parts or suspend and quickly resume tests to identify issues faster. So I was actually explaining, I was talking to somebody, and I was talking to our TV then and some folks about what the difference of Jenkins Freestyle is and Jenkins Pipeline. And so if I was to provide a metaphor, I really like to describe it as the difference between cooking and baking. At first glance, both methods require, various edible ingredients. They both call for cutting, chopping, mixing, stirring, all that manual labor, and they both can create really, really wonderful things to eat. So just talking about it is, right now I haven't had breakfast, so it is making me a little bit hungry. But when we look at the process, the actual process of cooking and baking are in fact very, very different. With baking, you have to get all of those ingredients right and put it in, before putting it in the oven. Then you can only see the results of how good that recipe turned out once the oven timer goes off. And with cooking, you can adjust the recipe as you go. You can taste it in the middle, add salt if you need, or turn off the oven in the middle, or if it's getting burnt, or turn off the stove in the middle if it's getting burnt. Jenkins Pipeline is like the cooking process. You can break your job into different sections so you know exactly which part of the recipe is not going well. So leveraging automation tools and CI servers like Jenkins accelerates your development process and increases avenues for feedback using tools. But building a team that moves quickly and works at the speed of DevOps takes much more than just the tools. It really is a mindset shift. But before we go and talk about that mindset shift, this is just one way that you can accelerate your continuous testing with TestComplete by going back to that original that original orange line we talked about earlier, looking at your development, seeing how you can break it into smaller pieces so that you can get faster feedback. So I'm getting questions right now about TestComplete. When we demo TestComplete, we can go through and show how many of these items can be accomplished. And we do have a question from Stephanie about test management. We can go through that as well. Before I go through in the tool aspect of this presentation, I do want to talk about that mindset shift. And really that mindset shift is where quality is changing to where quality can be understood and responsible for everyone across the development lifecycle. So on the SDLC, software development lifecycle phases you see on the left, there are many different types of participants that play a role in ensuring quality. They vary in experience, technical aptitude, and day-to-day responsibilities. However, when it is in the plan phase, design, or deploy, there are really three personas that can summarize maybe the technical expertise of a software team. There's the business stakeholder that often does not have as much technical expertise. There's the developer that has technical expertise, and then the tester who can be technical or not technical, depending on the organization. So many teams today are these three stakeholders that exist. Many teams are, have these three stakeholders work in silos because of the differences in technical expertise. However, there really is a need for collaboration for testers. And I want to go through kind of the experience and the struggle that many of you guys are experiencing, and how some of the features in TestComplete and the features and just moving towards this BDD movement can help with collaboration. One is looking at time constraints. So testers are usually a lot of times still at the tail end of a project. And depending on the application size and complexity, it takes days to convert code or test scenarios into test scripts. So including testers, including QA teams, part of the whole process makes that job started sooner. In addition, imagining, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, but imagine creating a test script and then for a feature that doesn't exist anymore, or realizing that a feature has changed. This has created a lot of misalignment for many organizations, or failure to communicate between these disparate different teams and different stakeholders, between that business, between the developer, between the QA team or tester. And so building collaboration across those stakeholders is going to be very key, so that we can find bugs sooner and that we can make and really decrease and increase cost savings. And that's where behavior-driven development enters. You may ask yourself, how do we really inspire disparate teams to collaborate? How do we advocate for iteration during the entire process? So BDD is a modern approach to software development where teams really can come to a shared, it focuses on kind of promoting this mindset shift to building a shared understanding on how an application should behave to foster continuous learning. So many organizations have turned to BDD, and it is increasingly becoming popular due to its ability to really use plain English syntax called Gherkin, or just using plain English sometimes to quickly align across stakeholders with varying technical expertise. So really bridging the gap between that business, the development, and QA teams, those three stakeholders, three circles we saw earlier. And regardless of how technical you are, every stakeholder can create a shared understanding of user requirements, making test automation easier and faster. So let's learn a little. I just want to throw another poll out there to understand the interest level around BDD. Does your team practice or want to adopt BDD today? So I'll go ahead and I'll share this poll. So I see people answering the poll inside the chat. If you could go ahead and enter your answer also in the poll launched, I'd love to get a comprehensive majority of where people are and their understanding of BDD and interest level around it. And really in terms of creating that mindset shift to move towards collaboration and united perspective. All right, wonderful. I'll go ahead and I'll stop this and then share the results with you. Oh, I'm having trouble seeing the results on my screen. I'm having trouble seeing, but I see that the majority here is that we're interested in learning more. So that's really wonderful to hear as well, that there are many people that I want to move towards this collaborative, united perspective. And adopting BDD and adopting a BDD approach really kind of enables that team to align, creating that perfect cross-section of needs and desires between these different stakeholders. So I definitely want to get towards the demo of how we can really do this with TestComplete. And before we get that, I'm going to just walk through what that workflow looks like so that then you can see what it actually experience what it looks like in the tool as well, and how the tool can help accelerate this approach. But the key stages for BDD is really around discovery, formulation, and automation. In the discovery, we're building this shared understanding of user requirements. We're taking those shared understanding, we're trying to build out examples on how an application behaves, and then take those examples and be able to convert them into test scripts quickly so that we can quickly validate that behavior, validate that application behavior. So what we're going to show with regards to the new features we have is really native BDD support. HipTest and the new features in TestComplete 14.0 consist of two SmartBear tools that really facilitate collaboration natively by reusing assets throughout the process and supporting an end-to-end BDD flow. So I'm going to pass it to, I'll quickly go through this workflow, but what we'll see in the demo is how we can create business requirements regardless of your technical expertise, how you can create feature files, whether it's in HipTest or TestComplete, and sync between the two and continue to iterate, and then how you can build step definitions using TestComplete to really accelerate your test automation for your BDD workflow. The amazing part of this addition is that you no longer have to stitch any tools together to support your BDD process. So alternative tools that support BDD in the market only address pieces of the entire BDD workflow. For example, with company A, you may only be able to write out business requirements and create feature files. And with company B and C, you may have to leverage third-party tools to support a BDD process. With all the new features in TestComplete, you can quickly build, create, iterate on your feature files, and then convert those feature files to step definitions, and then quickly build automated UI tests all in one tool without additional plugins or integrations. So I know there was a lot of interest in terms of learning more about BDD. I would love to kind of better understand, are you currently using a BDD automated tool right now? Let me see if I can. I'll launch this poll. And then if you are leveraging a BDD tool right now, in the chat room, if you can let me know, if you're in the chat, you can let me know which tools you are using. I'd love to kind of get a better understanding of tools that our customers are using. Looks like we have some robot framework. There's a question from Corey, do we need a HipTest license to utilize Gherkin? No, actually, you do not. You can actually utilize Gherkin even with a notepad. Oh, it looks like Param is doing a great job answering questions, so thank you, Param. He's like my secret weapon. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll share these results as well. It looks like many of you are not using a test automation tool for BDD. So I'm really excited about passing it on to Param now so that he can show you what that actually looks like within TestComplete.
All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're calling from. Again, my name is Param Chopra. I'm one of the sales engineers here in the U.S. team at SmartBear. And I cover not only our test management tools, Zephyr and HipTest, but our functional testing tools as well. So, feel free to check out SmartBear's website if you have any interest in some of the other tools or solutions that we have to offer. But today we'll be taking a look at specifically, is the HipTest and TestComplete integration. And so we're going to kind of add some concreteness to what Akshita's been talking about. And we have all these great ideas and workflows with behavior-driven development, but how do we actually implement those workflows, right? Because they'll just be ideas only, right, if we can't actually get the benefit of saving time or lowering costs. How do we actually do that? Well, we could certainly leverage a solution like HipTest and TestComplete, which I think, in my opinion, will cover up the bottlenecks, the pain points we see in users who are trying to pursue behavior-driven development using open source architecture. So for those of you in that polling question who are currently pursuing BDD, I'm sure a lot of you are using something like a Cucumber SpecFlow. So we're going to kind of cover maybe some of the weaknesses in those approaches, how HipTest and TestComplete can strengthen that approach so that BDD really becomes much more of a viable solution as we ultimately look to move to a more agile development structure, right, in the long term. So let me go ahead and get my screen shared. Just give me 1 second. And where we want to start first will be HipTest. Okay, and it looks like you should all be able to see my screen. Again, let us know if you're having any technical difficulties and the mouse moving around. So here's HipTest. And for those of you quickly who do not know what HipTest is a test management solution aimed at improving the workflows centered around behavior-driven development for multiple teams across any kind of technical industry, right? The idea is that we can allow users to easily collaborate in this tool, no matter what business unit you're on, write scenarios more efficiently and in a more maintainable way than, let's say, using open source architecture. And finally, giving us a much more broken down structure for our test automation. And then that's where TestComplete will come in, which will be the main part of this demo. And very briefly, I don't think I need to expound too much more what Akshita talked about with behavior-driven development, right? I think you all get the idea now. It's essentially discussion-based development, right? And you want to be able to collaborate. You need to be able to refactor quickly, and you will get a lot of feedback. That's where the automation comes in. We find that in open source offerings, this approach doesn't yield a lot of gains, right? If I'm writing out my scenarios in Notepad or an IDE by scratch, then if I want to be able to have a consistent business domain language and reuse some of the steps in my test cases, sure, it's a nice idea. It makes sense on paper, but if I have to physically rewrite those steps, then does it matter if I'm reusing them or not? No, right? I have a bottleneck. Similarly, right, if I'm using disparate tools or I'm across different teams and we're using something like a Google Drive to manage all my scenarios or Excel sheets, the things that are make it harder for us to share and collaborate, again, benefiting from this collaborative approach, BDD, right? And then, if we're not automating, or if the automating we're doing isn't done efficiently or is hard to manage, right? Again, hard to refactor, another bottleneck in this process that is BDD. So now this great, behavior-driven development process that makes, Agile a little more straightforward ends up not being the perfect solution. But we still believe in behavior-driven development, and so that's where HipTest exists to kind of cover these pain points I've just talked about. So very briefly, before I move on to TestComplete, the first piece, collaboration, is solved very simply by the interface here. I think being very straightforward to use, we can see summary of my scenarios and steps that make up those scenarios, along with maybe some high-level test results. And I'm able to do things like connect this tool to a Jira or a Slack. So now I'm able to go ahead and easily collaborate with my teams across my project management tools. Right? The whole idea here, again, is discussion-based development and testing. So that before you deploy any code or even begin to write unit tests, your whole team, your devs, your QA, your BAs, they're all working together, maybe not in the same room or same time, but at least in the same platform to make sure that the requirements of scenarios are scoped out properly. Now, Jira integration is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is add your server cloud address, and it becomes a one-click away integration between both products. We'll be able to see our test results in Jira as well. Now, the second value is the scenarios themselves, right? And again, in open source, if you're writing in Notepad, you're writing everything from scratch. You're refactoring everything from scratch. It's manual testing, essentially, right? And you all know how slow that can be. But with HipTest, we make it easy. If you take a look at one of my Gherkin scenarios here, again, Gherkin being that given, when, then approach. Very briefly, for those who don't not know about Gherkin, this is basically it. It's not a very complex language. We use given, when, thens to assign certain logical values to the steps that we're having so we can maybe reuse them in certain contexts later. More simply, certain steps might be my preconditioned steps, my given steps. Certain steps might be my action steps, like a when, and certain steps are my actual assertions or my then steps, right, the result. So I can have certain steps that are, given my precondition, when I have an action, then here's my result, right? That's how I'm generally writing out my test cases in Gherkin, and I can write them here in HipTest. But the idea, very simply, is that BDD says, hey, if you have a step like this, you want to reuse that step over and over again in your scenarios, right? I'm always going to have launched my website, right, in that similar language. But if I'm writing from scratch, I'm not benefiting from actually reusing it. But in HipTest, I don't have to write from scratch. I can go ahead and easily reuse any step I have with the suggestions editor, right? So I can simply start typing out suggestion and click on the thing I want to use, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Super easy for me to reuse any step I've already created in my project again. Very much like an IntelliSense ability in an IDE, right? You can reuse any function you define. And similar to that, not only can you quickly reuse these, but you can also edit them from a single point of location as well, right? We give you a single point of maintenance for every single step in your project you're using in your scenarios, right? These become their own little modular pieces for you to quickly reuse and bulk edit. It is a major pain point we've seen with customers of ours who or prospects who've come to us who said, hey, we're attempting to follow BDD, we're using Cucumber, we're writing our scenarios in Gherkin. But again, the refactoring, the actual workflows that involved in BDD, right? Continuous refactoring, continuous reuse. If that is hard to do, you're going to be bogged down. With HipTest, we make it straightforward with the scenario editor. Now, finally, without spending too much detail here in HipTest, the last piece is automating this. Before we do that, we definitely want to data drive our test case. So let me go to my data-driven version of this test. You can see my data table here. I could totally paste the Gherkin table or use the editor itself. And ideally, we want to data drive our test case, as we can see here, to run it multiple times, either manually in HipTest or, of course, to automate. And ultimately, you want to automate, especially data-driven tests, you want to automate. And BDD says you don't automate just to save time. You automate to get more feedback. The more feedback you have about your application, the more informed decisions, the more quick decisions you could make when it comes to refactoring. But again, if refactoring is a pain, bottleneck. But as you can see, HipTest makes refactoring the scenario here easily. Let's see how the refactoring and maintenance process now gets transferred to TestComplete, right? Our automation tool of choice. For sure, with HipTest, we could certainly pick one of the multiple frameworks here to automate against, but it is on us to pick an automation tool of choice. And we found that as a company at SmartBear that we've been able to definitely beat out open source solutions like a Selenium or nothing at all for desktop when it comes to automating our solutions. So we felt it would be natural to then partner TestComplete and a tool like HipTest to bring behavior-driven development over to our customer base and to not just developers and more technical folk, but to QA teams as well, to more mixed teams, to people who not have time to build out a full automated framework. So let's take a look at what this project looks like in TestComplete, right? So let's go ahead and open up TestComplete. I think what I'm going to do is, all right, switch my screen.
And as you're switching, one of the questions that we're receiving that I think might be helpful for everyone on the line is, is this in, when you switch over to TC, is it in keyword mode or is it in script mode? And actually, you can script, or you can leverage keyword, you can leverage record and replay, or you can leverage scripting. You do not have to stick to a preferred method at all. You can leverage all those capabilities in TC once those feature files are there. In addition, another question we received that also might be beneficial is that you need two tools to employ a BDD workflow? You actually can start your BDD workflow directly in TestComplete, and that's what we'll probably show in the next couple of minutes.
Right. Just to be clear about the keyword question, we don't support keyword tests for Gherkin at this time. Everything will be in script. But as Akshita pointed out, we can record the script in TestComplete. So in terms of your workflow, you don't have to actually write the code, but it will be in a script format as of now. I'm pretty sure our folks here at SmartBear are going to be iterating on that solution. So, don't you worry. If you have a lot of demand for that, we'll definitely be able to put something like that out. But I just wanted to be clear about that. Then HipTest, Michael asks, HipTest is a cloud service. It is a cloud service. We do have an on-premises version that we can help work with you on. All right. Thank you for your questions. Let's go ahead and get moving here. So we're in TestComplete. We want to go ahead and automate against your HipTest scenarios, right? So how do we go ahead and do that? Well, first, I want to be able to create a TestComplete project against my HipTest project, right? My HipTest Smart Store project. Let me drag that over here. Right. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create a new project. We'll call this, let's say, webinar 1. You guys are the first webinar, so you get webinar 1. And let's put in JavaScript. And I would select BDD files. And someone asked, hey, Tim, can we use just regular Gherkin files with TestComplete? Sure. But I heavily recommend HipTest because, again, for the aforementioned reasons and quick demo HipTest that I pointed out. Now, HipTest, we'll go ahead and save your HipTest credentials, or you could add your local BDD feature files as well. But once you go ahead and pull from HipTest, right, I can select the project I want. In this case, my Smart Store project for our Smart Store application that we have here at SmartBear. And then we'll go ahead and get our scenarios imported. So you'll notice that these are the same exact scenarios I got from HipTest, now thrown into a feature file. So TestComplete supports feature files now. They only exist, I believe they exist in this specific BDD style project, but we have our feature files, then we have these step definitions for those feature files. And just like, working in IDE, for those of you who use Cucumber or SpecFlow, I can select any item here, any step in my Gherkin scenario, and go ahead and go to definition, right? So from a workflow standpoint, pretty similar to what you've seen already, but we've taken that nice, common workflow, thrown it directly into TestComplete. So let's go ahead and let's see here. BDD in TestComplete is going to be applicable in 3 ways. I mentioned 2 of them: integration with integration with HipTest, and importing Gherkin feature files as well. We could totally also create feature files directly in TestComplete if we want to, right? We're trying to be flexible here. I understand teams can have different needs. My recommendation as an engineer is still to go with a tool like HipTest just because it makes the maintenance of the scripts easier. But again, we have full Gherkin support regardless. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do specifically with the scenario. I need to go ahead and record against this. And, it's funny, in my TestComplete demos, me and my engineers, and my co-engineers, we've argued that you want to be able to break up your recording processes into smaller bits. It's better to do record and replay in smaller bursts and larger bursts, right? You have more maintainable code, right? You're solving smaller problems, not larger ones, and you can easily, drag and drop and combine, right? But sometimes it's hard for us to know what to break up, right? What's the scope of that? Then that's the beauty of BDD and HipTest. You do all that scoping out beforehand in HipTest, right? With your business analyst team, with your devs, but you work together to scope out, okay, how should I unit test this? How should I break up my requirements? And then once you go ahead and get those same scenarios or requirements here in HipTest, it's broken up for you, right? My little small pieces are easy to implement. And not only could I, let's say, script directly here in JavaScript, but I could also just go ahead and record a routine, right? So I click record routine, TestComplete with minimize, and I can go about my business, right? In this case, maybe I'm launching my application here, right? Our Smart Store. So then, there's my first step. Stop. Right? Just like that. And I could continue to write and record like this, and this is what we've always recommended. You want to record it, right? Break up your tests into small bursts. And usually in TestComplete, right, you might have been dragging and dropping your keyword tests over, but here you don't even have to, right? Because each of these steps just refers to some line in your feature file. So you reuse, if you write more feature files or import more feature files where you launch a website, and I'm sure a lot of you will be launching an application or running a common assertion or tearing down an application, you define it one time, right? This is a single point of maintenance for your code. And you saw how quick it was for me to record that. And now I can use this step definition file against as many different feature files as I create. So we're really fully supporting the BDD workflow here. We're speeding up automation directly by having record and replay and all the wonderful maintenance features TestComplete has to offer, right? debugging through the error log, breakpoints. And then, right, finally from a maintenance standpoint, we want to go ahead and refactor, right? I talked a lot about refactoring with automation. So we're going to get a lot of results from these automated tests here. How to go ahead and refactor. I might go ahead and do that in HipTest, right? So maybe I'm running, maybe you want to change the price of the watch, whatever it may be. Here's how easy it is. I can go ahead right here and make a change, right, in HipTest. Maybe I want to say the price should be $25,000, right? So in TestComplete, you see our price is this. So maybe we go ahead in HipTest and we change the price to $25,000, and we say maybe add some more lines to the script. So the price should be $25K, and I should be broke as well, right? Because that's an incredibly expensive watch that I can't afford. So we'll go ahead and add that to my scenario, right? And HipTest on the cloud, it's saved automatically. And then in TestComplete, all I have to do is go to my project, update from HipTest. So this is how we can keep up to date, right? Continuously, right? Continuous testing, to Akshida's point, is what this all goes back to, right? So as my teammates are working in HipTest, refactoring, rescoping the scenarios, getting more feedback, maybe I'm working over here, maybe a little siloed, maybe not, automating, I'm not really siloed anymore, right? I can go ahead and pull that information live. Do I want to see how the scenarios might have updated, any new feature or any new steps I have to implement? Click Update from HipTest. And there we have it, right? Changes are really, really quick. And so we're allowing teams to work together more, but now again, utilizing the power of TestComplete, all the time saving that has, right, as a proven solution in the market, but now leveraging a connection to HipTest so that we can take TestComplete's ability to refactor, maintain tests quickly, and write tests quickly into the BDD workflow, right? Now we're adding some concreteness to this agile process. We're getting some actual value out of this, right? So now you've updated this here in HipTest. A couple more things. You might want to go ahead and run something against HipTest, right? So let me go ahead and actually open up a completed project here. Should have, this one should work. All right, here we go. And this is the same exact project that we were showing you in HipTest earlier. It's actually connected to the same project over here, but it's completed, right? So I finished running all my steps here. So I could go ahead and run these step definitions, right? And I can also run data-driven versions against this, right? If you data drive in HipTest, your data set comes over here. And so you certainly could use an Excel sheet, but those of you who are using Gherkin or using BDD, attach all your data in HipTest. It's way easier to maintain that data over here. Again, you want to think, where are you maintaining, where are you specifically working? I think a lot of that data, a lot of that example mapping, that's what essentially what data-driven testing is, should be done here in HipTest. And then we can get that format over here in TestComplete to run, right? Quickly, what we can do is select what specific run we want to associate with in HipTest. So maybe for some context here, I can create test runs in HipTest, and I can create runs based off of, maybe certain folder locations or tags in my scenarios, and then I can go ahead and automate that run here. And so once I have my run created, sure, I can run it manually, but I want to go ahead and automate it. And normally in HipTest, I might click Automate and export my code, but with TestComplete, I don't have to. I'll go to TestComplete, I'll go to my current project properties, go to HipTest, and I can select the run I want right here. Notice how we're bound to HipTest, right? So I have my list of test runs. I want to go ahead and by default use either the last created test run or a specific one. I want TC1 instead. And I want to save my results to HipTest, right? Maybe even synchronize these scenarios in HipTest during test run. So we'll save my project there. And then all I can do, all I have to do is run this example. So let's do that. Let me just close out my window here. And again, usually I can just run this in the same way that users might run a Gherkin scenario in an IDE, right? It's no different. I can run all my scenarios or run a specific scenario. And then TestComplete's going to work in the same way you've always seen it work, right? It's going to launch your application and run through my scenario in a rapid fashion, as you're seeing right here. So I'll take a look at some of your questions in just a bit. But as this is running here, we want to know where the results going to be tracked, right? And TestComplete's not a reporting tool. You need an ALM tool for that. That's where HipTest comes in. And the data, because it plugs in a tool like Jira, can flow all the way back there through our integration with that tool. So, okay, so we didn't have a step definition for then I should be broke, so my test case did not pass, but looks like the rest failed. But we want to be able to see this, these results here in HipTest. Okay, maybe part of my requirement, right, I was not able to prove that I was broke, whatever it may be, was failing. How do I see these results back in HipTest? Then stretch out even further back to my requirement. How do I get some traceability here? So let's go over, take a look at HipTest and see if those results updated. We can refresh the page. Let's see here. Did I run this test on this one? I'm not sure. Okay, it looks like it was last edited just now. That's good. And all my tests failed, unfortunately for me. And there we have it, right? So we tried to verify the price. I didn't run a data-driven test as of now, but this test case did fail. Here are the manual steps, but I have a result of the failure here. Now, the log itself is in TestComplete, right, which I could totally download and add as an attachment directly in HipTest. As of now, you can see the more concrete or lower-level results directly here. But my end result, the failure at a high level, which maybe just my VP cares about, my PO, right? PO might not want to see exactly how it failed, but they have to know, okay, it's not working. I have to plan, right? So lower results can stay here in TestComplete. You can obviously share these out very easily and post to a tool like Jira. But then the high-level result at least gets thrown back into HipTest, which then can be thrown into a tool like Jira, right, where just for a quick show of that, my reporting ends up being traced to something like this, right? So great. We have a workflow now of creating our scenarios, maintaining and updating them, automating them with TestComplete, you saw that integration, and then getting our results not only back into HipTest, but perhaps into a tool like Jira. So great, we have this process. We're not necessarily trying to manually do this process to set it up, right? That's where CI comes in to end my demo here, right? So how do we leverage a tool like Jenkins Pipeline or Jenkins, Bamboo, Circle CI to go ahead and automate this whole process? Well, TestComplete can easily be triggered via command line. We have integrations, as Akshita said, with Jenkins and Jenkins Pipeline, Bamboo, among other things. And HipTest can also work well with CI tools. We can integrate with pretty much any CI tool out there. Your exports can allow you to send data back to HipTest by associating a specific test to run with a CI run ID. But the idea is that we can get all this data automatically triggered and sent back here. Actually, in fact, maybe I misspoke a little bit. It's actually simpler than that. TestComplete itself is going to automatically send the data back to HipTest because we can send calls to their API. So with the CI tool, actually becomes even simpler, whereas in the past, purely with HipTest and your own automation tool, there's some work to be done to set up a CI correspondence between HipTest and your CI tool. Now TestComplete is that correspondence and your automation center. So you can use a simple free plugin, let's say with Jenkins Pipeline, launch TestComplete, and then TestComplete in turn, once it's launched, will automatically update your results back here in HipTest, which then can go to your project management tool, right? So we're kind of seeing now how this whole process is informed continuously. That's the whole point about BDD, right? It's this whole giant architecture I'm talking about. We're running continuously every couple of weeks. We're continuously iterating into software. And the idea is that, and my point here, is a tool like HipTest and TestComplete can eliminate those roadblocks and bottlenecks that make that iterative process hard to actually achieve, right? We're in a business of making this more concrete for you, our users. So that is my demo of HipTest and our TestComplete integration. Any specific questions, please throw them in the Q&A, but if not, I'll give it back to you, Akshita.
All right, wonderful. It looks like we have a lot of engagement, a lot of questions, so we hope we are answering as much as we can. There's a couple ones that I wanted to share with everyone on the line because I do think they were useful. We were asked, for example, can BDD be used for scripting desktop applications? Yes, the application under test will actually not matter. You can do BDD for a desktop, web, a mobile, or packaged applications. Another question that I think would really be beneficial, because I know a lot of people are maybe using a Cucumber framework. the Gherkin files associated with a Cucumber framework can actually be reused in TestComplete. In fact, the BD framework you use to convert Gherkin to step definitions shouldn't even matter. So that means SpecFlow, Cucumber, Lattice, etc. all will work.
Actually, Dustin, I answered your question via text, but I actually want to, I think it's a good question. He asked, hey, we update our scenarios in HipTest. Does the code get updated in TestComplete? Not necessarily, but it depends now, right? So you might notice that in Gherkin or in HipTest, I can create parameters, right? Like that website is my parameter. That price we're searching for is a parameter. And we can see it evidenced if you go to my HipTest project, right? Where is that project? Smart Store. Right. We can see that ultimately things like this that you might be subject to change, you want to make them parameters. It's kind of grayed out here. It's a parameter in my step, right? So the idea is that parameters are like functional arguments. That means you can data drive them, and if you change something, there it's an abstract variable basically, right? So it's not changing, just the data that gets fed to it changes. So to answer your question, Dustin, if I change some of the scenarios here, I maybe change the website value that we're data driving by, that gets updated here in TestComplete, right? Notice when I launch our website, I'm pulling in from param1. And in Gherkin, when you add parameters or arguments in quotes, like I'm doing here, right, it becomes an argument in the step definitions function automatically. Therefore, I can just call it. So if I was to update that data in HipTest, right, very natural thing to do, update from my test URL to production URL, I don't have to change my code at all. Right? So it really depends how you create that code. But again, how you create that code is fully informed by all the work you do in HipTest. So data drive, parameterize, be modular in HipTest, the work in TestComplete becomes far, far easier.
Also, as we're answering more questions on the line, I know there's a couple people who have specific questions wanting to see certain features in TestComplete. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll so that we can definitely reach out to you. So if you are interested in being contacted to learn more about the following tools that Param just showed here, feel free to enter into the poll, and we can that way proactively reach out to all of you and help. I noticed some other questions. For example, Paul, you asked about, can we speak to testing web services? We definitely have those features, so feel free to kind of put yes, TestComplete, yes, TestComplete, and we can make a note to also reach out to you with regards to our ability to test for APIs and microservices. We also have another question here. How can we run tagged at smoke test, at regression test specific scenarios?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Param.
If you have the answer, go ahead, Akshita. I was just trying to remember. Prashant showed me the answer. I'm just...
Well, in HipTest, you can actually enter specific tags, and then when you do that in TestComplete as well. Param has just highlighted here. And then when you are in TestComplete and you right-click on that step definition, you'll see some of those tags present on the Gherkin as above the Gherkin step as Param is showing. And you can run specific a suite of tests that has that tag associated to it. I hope that answers that question.
Right. There should be a how in a documentation more specifically, but there is a way. I don't know, Prashant, if you're on the line, if you want to speak very, very quickly, but there is a way to run via the tag specifically, which makes tagging in HipTest and therefore in TestComplete very, very useful.
So I don't know if you can see. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, awesome. If you right-click on the word scenarios in the Project Explorer and
run.
There we go.
You can see run all of those specific tags. Sorry, Prashant.
You were somewhere, but
there you go.
Prashant for being online, our wonderful product owner. You can definitely fill in the blanks when I cannot. All right.
All right, wonderful. So I know we have a couple questions about API, so we'll reach out for those people who are interested in kind of doing and seeing a demo of kind of API specific features, I did want to kind of describe that a little bit. Param, could you stop sharing and I'll share some of the other enhancements that we have with TestComplete that might speak to some of those who are interested in the API test. But TestComplete 14.0, as I mentioned, includes many other updates to our API testing platform for faster API and UI testing directly in TestComplete. In fact, in our next webinar, we'll be on how to build a single framework for API and UI tests to really speed up those test cycles. At SmartBear, so I would just take a look at smartbear.com/resources/webinars to see that demo live. At SmartBear, we are also committed to supporting kind of the latest technologies and controls to continue to provide the #1 object recognition engine. So you see that we've added support for Shadow DOM to really help find and identify those elements that are deeply embedded in your UI, and also including custom elements, especially enhancing our web testing. In addition, we are now supporting OpenFin. Many organizations, modern financial institution applications leverage this framework, so we've supported that as well. Native BDD support and these enhancements in TestComplete, we believe are really going to optimize test automation efforts for all of you to pave a more direct and seamless path for DevOps and just being agile. Thank you so much for all of those, everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Prashant and Param, for being available on the call and demoing our features and being excited as much as I am, and we hope you all are too. We'll go ahead and take some time. We'll take a look at any pending questions that we didn't get to, but just a reminder that the recording for this webinar will be available at smartbear.com/resources/webinars. Thank you. Have a great rest of the evening or day.